On February 24th of 2023, police would receive a phone call from Juliana Perez Magalis to report an emergency. A male voice, later identified as Brenden Banfield, would explain to the dispatch that he had shot the man who stabbed his wife. Officers would arrive at the Banfield residence to what they described as an appalling scene. Officers discovered Joseph Ryan had been fatally shot and Christine Banfield was suffering from stab wounds. Christine was transported to the hospital but unfortunately would pass away. Officers would notice that there were 3 people left in the house unharmed: Brenden, Juliana, and Brenden and Christine's daughter. The officers would then talk to Juliana about what happened, and she would state that her and Brenden left the house early that morning. Juliana would state that around 7 a.m. that morning, she would take the Banfield's daughter to the zoo, but on her way there, she realized that she forgot their packed lunch, so she would turn around. Juliana would state that when she arrived back at the residence, she would notice that there was an unfamiliar car up front. She would then proceed to call Christine, but Christine wouldn't answer. So then she proceeded to call Brenden. She would tell Brenden about the situation, and so she would wait for Brenden to return home before they both entered the house. Juliana would then take the Banfield's daughter to the basement where she would wait until she heard a commotion. Then she would walk up the stairs, and as she reached the top, she could hear Brenden yell, "Drop the knife." Juliana would then state that she saw Joseph with a knife to Christine's throat. Then Joseph would proceed to stab Christine, which caused Brenden to shoot him. Then, according to Juliana, Brenden would then tell her the code to the safe that was located in the bathroom so she could get another gun. Juliana would then retrieve said gun and use the gun to shoot Joseph as well. An autopsy report done on Joseph Ryan would show that he was struck twice, once in the head and another in the chest. It was the shot in the chest, Juliana's bullet, that would be the fatal blow. After months of investigating, Juliana would be charged with the second-degree murder in the death of Joseph Ryan. The prosecution also expressed their suspicion in the time gap between Juliana's 911 calls. Juliana would call 911 2 times within minutes, but before talking to dispatch, she would hang up. Juliana would call 911 one final time, but in the phone call, she would state that a friend had just been hurt before you can hear Brenden speak into the phone expressing that he had just shot his wife's attacker. There had been allegations of an affair between Juliana and Brenden. Officers discovered that during the arrest of Juliana that she had moved into the master bedroom with Brenden. Officers stated that Juliana's clothes were in the closet and that her lingerie was skewed across the bed. There was also a framed photo of Brenden and Juliana on the bedside table. The prosecution believes that the killings were part of a bigger plan between Brenden and Juliana. It had been confirmed by officials that Brenden and Juliana had started their affair several months prior to the killings. The prosecution even found out that the couple had gone to a gun range about 2 months prior to the killings. Brenden even went back to that same gun range separately to buy a pistol, which was the same pistol that was used to shoot Joseph. The prosecution expresses the idea that the gun was used to eliminate the only living witness. Juliana's lawyer would state that she acted in self-defense. They stated he had just stabbed Christine Banfield. It seems perfectly reasonable that a second shot would be fired in order to make sure that he was no longer a threat to Brenden, Christine, or Juliana. During their investigation, officials would find out that Brenden and Juliana changed their phone numbers not too long before the murders. 8 days prior to the killing, Juliana changed hers. 4 days prior to the killings, Brenden changed his. Juliana and Brenden in the months before the killings had gone on a trip to New York together where they took romantic photos. Officials had suspected Brenden's involvement, but he had not officially been charged until a year after Juliana was charged. Brenden Banfield would be charged with 4 counts of aggravated murder in the deaths of Christine Banfield and Joseph Ryan, along with 1 count of use of a firearm during the commission of a felony. During Brenden's bond hearing, the prosecution would state that they had reports from 2 distinctive expert forensic investigators who had spent over a year reviewing the evidence. The prosecution state that the reports are important because it supports their idea that Christine and Joseph's body had been moved and repositioned after their deaths. The prosecution stated that Joseph's arms had also been moved and smeared in Christine's blood. Brenden's lawyer would then state that what happened was not evidence of a husband killing his wife. They stated, "It just doesn't add up, Judge." Brenden's lawyer would also express that he needed to take care of his children and that Brenden was not a flight risk. The prosecution argued that Brenden could easily flee due to the 3 major airports that were located near him. They also presented evidence that showed that Brenden had been making an effort to learn Portuguese and was preparing for a life in Brazil. When on the stand, Brenden invoked his Fifth Amendment right and remained silent. Brenden would be denied bail and he is currently waiting in jail for his court date. The prosecution believed that somebody took Christine's laptop and created the adult fetish account on it. They say that they don't know who created it, but that is where Joseph Ryan had been contacted on. They say that on the morning of the killings, Joseph came to the Banfield house with the intention of carrying out a SA fantasy. According to friends, Joseph was very open about being on the fetish website, but investigators still questioned Juliana's version of events because he was not known to be violent. On the contrary, friends who knew Christine stated that the messages that talked about their rendezvous did not sound like her. The prosecution also found that there was no evidence that Christine was into any kind of fetish. After digging a little deeper, investigators would discover that Juliana was not the first affair Brenden had. There were several credible women that came forward to talk to investigators about their affair with Brenden. There was one woman who explained that during her affair with Brenden several years ago, he would constantly promise that he was going to leave his wife. He eventually even told her that it would be easier if Christine just wasn't around. Officials have been listening to the phone calls between Juliana and Brenden at the Fairfax County Jail. During one of their conversations, Juliana can be heard saying, "I hope that you are not just staying with me because you are afraid I'm going to turn on you." Juliana's trial is scheduled for November of 2024, and Brenden's trial is scheduled for as early as February of 2025. If convicted, Juliana is facing more than 40 years in prison, and Brenden is facing life in prison without the possibility of parole. And that is the end of today's video. If you like today's video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, be safe, Earthlings. Peace out.